Moving on to mistake number 3 of 18 here, and we are underestimating the cost of repairs or ongoing property maintenance. This, again, is a big one. A lot of real estate investors, when they first get into being a landlord and buying rental property, thinks that they're just going to buy a property, sit back, and just get the money, collect it, and all the money they collect is going to go into the bank. They're going to be making so much money, and all of this money is just going to be rolling in. Call it mailbox money. Just going to get the money in the mailbox every month, and it's just going to be fantastic, and life is going to be good, and so forth. Well, that's true until you start having problems with your maintenance, until they call about the heater not working, or the air conditioner not working, or there's a hole in the roof, or there's a leak somewhere and causing a problem here. So right now, not budgeting for these can be a huge, major expense. Now, at the Veteran Landlord, we like to take a more proactive approach to this. So I like to make sure that whenever people buy a property, and that's kind of what we teach, is whenever you buy the property, make sure you replace certain key things in the property that are going to cause you problems here. I mean, realistically, it may be less than $1,000 to go through and replace all these things in a house every time you buy it. But once you buy it, you know that these things are going to cause you problems. Just some plumbing issues, some things regarding electrical, things like that. So we cover that training at the Veteran Landlord, but not including the cost of these repairs are going to hurt you, because a lot of people don't factor that in, and they don't have a reserve or a bank account that has some additional money in it that's set aside just in case their property has a problem. Now, what happens with this is that it creates a financial burden. One of the things you don't want to do is you don't want to be the type of landlord that collects all the money and then spends it all every month without saving some or without having that reserve. So one of the things that you need to be able to do is have that money in there in case there is a problem, or to expect it. Now, some of the things that we even kind of recommend on some people, and things that I've done myself, is if I were to buy a property, for instance, and I don't know some of the mechanisms, and maybe I didn't go through and replace the furnace or the air conditioning unit, even though it might be, still around the 7 to 10-year-old mark. Well, one of the things I might want to do is just incorporate a home warranty into the purchase of that program for the very first year. So when you buy a home warranty, one of the things that you're governing is that that's sort of like insurance in case you have any problems with that property, at least for the first year. Typically, I don't do it for the second year. What I'm trying to do is that I want to make sure that all of these major systems, the plumbing, all the things that are covered under home warranty, if any of those things have a problem the very first year, which most likely they are, because in the first year you're going to go through all the seasons. You're going to go through the heat, the cold, whatever, rain, wind, all that stuff's going to happen, and the mistakes or the problems that are going to come up in your property are going to come up. So you're going to be able to sit back and know and have those fixed at a much reduced cost. So home warranties are like something like 75 or $100 for a deductible, and then you can have potentially a larger problem that costs you hundreds, if not even thousands of dollars, repaired for a very low expense. So it's kind of like insurance in case any of that stuff fails the very first year, just to make sure you get beyond that first year. But sometimes we do that depending on particular properties here. If we don't replace these systems, we might want to let it go for a few years, but we definitely replace those systems if they're older than, say, about 12 years. We don't really keep them in the house, especially if they're in bad shape, if they're rusted and stuff like that. So underestimating the cost of repairs, please make sure you have money in your account to cover normal wear and tear mistakes. Now, one of the things that's not on here that I will include in this section, that is also a mistake I see. This is not mistake number 19 on this list here, but I'm just including this, is what I call tenant chargebacks. Now, a lot of the repairs and maintenance that you get, landlords, this is one of the things that is why your lease is so valuable. It's why your lease is so valuable, is whenever a tenant causes a problem, it doesn't always mean that it's the landlord's expense to repair it. Now, ultimately, as far as the courts are concerned, you are the landlord, you are the owner of the property, you must maintain the property. If you don't maintain the property, then that causes other legal ramifications depending upon your state, where tenants may not have to pay rent. They can use their rent to pay for those repairs and then send you the difference if you don't respond to them in a timely manner to get the repair fixed, and it's causing a problem. So one of the things about this with these is when the tenant themselves make a mistake. A common example I like to use is what happens if you rent it to a family, the kids are playing in the house, and then all of a sudden the kids are throwing something and they're playing with the football, and the football hits the window and breaks the window. That kind of an expense, that is part of maintenance. The window will have to be repaired, but it doesn't necessarily mean that kind of case that is the owner's responsibility to fix it. So one of the common clauses that you have in your lease will just basically cover that if the resident, or the tenant in this case, or guest damages the property, that the tenant is responsible for fixing it. So one of the things I want to keep in mind is that just because there's a problem that happened, if there's neglect in that repair, or it was caused by the tenant, that you should, and I do, charge back to the tenant. That is their responsibility. But if it's a common, regular maintenance issue, then that's something that you're going to have to be able to cover. Have some money in the reserve. Now, a lot of people ask me how much. How much should you have in reserve? At least, I would say 3 months rent, even up to 6 months rent for that particular property in a reserve account, just to make sure that you never have to go negative on your monthly cash flow to cover this. So if you're still working, or if you have another job or business, that the rental property doesn't cause a negative cash flow. You want to make sure when you buy it, all of that stuff is covered. And again, we cover that in the veteran landlord training, but you want to make sure that right from the very beginning, you plan when you buy the property to cover all of these maintenance items, so that your maintenance items are covered, and you reduce all these calls and maintenance costs. Typically for the first 2 to 5 years, easily. So that's a mistake I see people making.